So first, we'll start with a very simple built-in workflow for building and publishing a model. So a data scientist is going to go in and will work with an algorithm. This really just means you're making a commit to a Git repository, and then we will initiate the build and publish workflow to actually serve that as an API version in Algorithmia. So let's jump over to our platform. So here in Algorithmia, I have a credit card approval algorithm. Each algorithm is backed by a Git repository. We'll look at that in a second. But basically, this algorithm takes in different information about a customer, like their housing situation and employment status, and then returns a result on whether or not they would be approved for a credit card and what their associated risk score is. So this model is actually up and running on Algorithmia. I want to go in and release a new version of this model by making a change. So I'm just going to use the built-in source code editor here. And if we look at the code, there's a few things going on here. One of them is that we're loading in a trained scikit-learn model, and then we're processing the inputs inside of this apply function, making a prediction, and returning some results. So this is all just Python code that uses our trained scikit-learn model. So in this case, I'd like to change from this trained model to another trained model I have. That might be, in this case, it's a gradient boosting classifier, and we're changing to a random forest. You might be changing to a different model that has different features, or whatever that might be within your algorithm. So once I make that change, I'm going to click Save and Build. On the back end, this is making a Git commit, and build is actually containerizing my serving function here into a container, handling all the dependencies like scikit-learn. And once this build process is finished, it'll actually return a test endpoint that I can use to make sure my model is behaving like I expect. So after a few more seconds, we should see a test endpoint come up here and it'll say that our build is finished. And at that point, we can actually publish a new version of this algorithm. Okay, so our algorithm build is complete, and now you can see there's a test endpoint down here. I can send it a sample input, which will use the default values, and after a few seconds, we'll get back a response that contains the whether or not they're approved for a credit card and what their associated risk score is from this random forest classifier. So now I can go to publish, and I can put in some release notes. So I'll say switch to random forest model. And here I can test the sample inputs and outputs to make sure they're behaving as expected. And finally, I can assign a new version number. So here I'll go from version 16 to version 17 and publish that. So just like that, we went from version 16 to version 17, made a simple change to swap to a different version of the model, and now all of my consuming applications can bump on their own cadence to the new version that's available.